So everyone, thank you for joining. I think we have a quorum and we can start. Thank you for joining. Today I'm going to talk about the vendors as a process and the curation process and integration in your fintech products. And we're going to discuss various topics, and you will have an ability to ask the questions. So a little bit about me. My name is Igor Tomic, and I'm CEO of Dash Devs. That's a software development and fintech consultancy company. Also, we started recently a new project, which is called FinTech Garden. It's a community media-based project, which is going to help a little bit to navigate in the fintech space area. It's just ramping up, but we would like to provide as clear as possible information about the fintech space, because if you're starting to work in this industry, I would say there is a huge lack of information from the technical and business standpoint, and our project FinTech Garden is aimed to close this gap and give you an ability to see what's going on. And those webinars are part of this process. As the company, as Dash Devs, we worked in fintech for almost 15 years. We help various companies and various products to launch in different regions, starting from United States, United Kingdom, where we have really interesting projects in our portfolio, and also in MENA region. Today, I will cover a few from our portfolio, and they work as vendors in this space. And usually we launch our solutions with the different size. And one of the products that we have as a company, we have an ability to launch the bank in 9 months, completely from the scratch to the working solution in production. And we help to different kind of financial institutions. We help to ramp up their business, start from the scratch, or enhance their financial and product performances. And we have quite big experience working with the vendors. For instance, one of the banks that we launched in United Kingdom, it has, as the fintech solution, it has 25 different integrations with vendors, starting with the banking rails, account holding, brokerage, KYC, KYB processes. So this that I'm going to explain today, it comes from the experience, and definitely it's a dialogue. In the end, you will have a possibility to ask the questions. And if something is not covered, I would be glad to answer your questions. So today, we will start with a small managerial topic, is Iron Triangle, because it allows and helps to understand what for we are selecting the vendors in our fintech projects or products. And then it will help to align the expectations and the needs and basically see what it gives us as the final results. We will talk what is the vendor, what are the types of the vendors, how we can differentiate them, because without deep understanding what are we looking for and how it affects our business, it's really hard to say what is the best choice and what is the logic to choose from. I will give 2 examples of the cases that we had in our experience as a good case or bad case. And we will go a little bit how the digital bank is usually structured and what are the brands or what are the vendors that you will use to build this solution. And a little bit about our FinTech Core. It's a product which also can be considered as a vendor solution for fintechs. It will take me about 50 minutes for the slides, and then we will have 10 minutes for the questions. So I think we're ready to go. The really first basic element that I would like to cover is Iron Triangle. It's a quite well-known managerial approach. As a manager in software development processes or in other processes, we're always working with the limitations. And one way to look on any issues is to see them from three different points, like scope, cost, and time. And as a manager, usually you are finding yourself in this triangle and you try to actually find out the point which is balancing all those 3 things as a scope, time, and cost. And usually as a manager, you really can fix 2 items as the time or scope, and 1 is movable. So you never can reach all the 3 points simultaneously, and you need to make sure what kind of issues you would like to deal with. Like if you have unlimited budget, then you can really fix the scope and time. You can say, okay, I want the solution in 9 months with this feature set, and then it doesn't matter how much it will cost for me. Or vice versa, if you are limited on the budget and you definitely know what you would like to execute and release to the public, then the time is your managerial point of work, because then depending on the time, how long it take, you can reduce the cost, but still keep reduce the cost, keep in the budget, and then go with the scope. And I think the same logic can be applied with the vendors, because a lot of things that vendors are providing, they're quite digital. Like they mostly the software, yes, we have licenses, yes, we have certain partnerships with the central banks, integration payment rails, but a lot of components that you will find today in vendors, they're software. And it means that at some point, you might be able to develop the solutions yourself, or basically you have a choice to reduce the time to the market. Instead of developing the solution, you can buy it, or you can have a greater scope of the functionality. Instead of developing yourself with the same cost, you actually can reduce the time and increase the scope of your project. So talking and explaining the difference in the vendors and approaches, you should always keep in mind what it gives you from those 3 points as a scope, cost, and time. So let's dive deep into the software vendors. So the software vendor, and we should be clear what exactly it means. It's usually an organization that creates the solution for the larger market, and it works with something which I would say can even be commoditized. So if you go to the fintech market nowadays, there are quite a lot of vendors for the KYC, KYB process, and I think it's a good example of the vendors for commoditized service. So instead of developing the solution yourself for checking your customers, checking the documents, various types, proof of identity, and so on and so forth, you can go to the third party, which will give you the solution to the business process. And those companies are usually called vendors or software vendors, and that's how we will reference them today during this webinar. And the map of the fintech vendors is really huge. It's just the slightly piece of the market nowadays. You can find lots of solutions, and I think starting from 2010, we can see a really big boom in this area, because mobile engineering and mobile devices really ramped up the solutions, because banks are becoming more digital. They're sitting in your pockets. You are not going to the branch. You are not talking to the real humans, and all those things digitally require new solutions for the old business processes, like acquiring the customer, making sure that he's onboarded, properly checked, and even latest events in the world, like Russia invading Ukraine as a full-scale war, requires us as a fintechs more due diligence and compliance, because sanctions lists are recently updated, and we make sure that we are compliant with our jurisdiction requirements. And this is requiring solid piece of work and the involvement of your team. And usually we can go to the vendors, take certain functionality, and without spending the time of the team designing the solution, then executing it, we can buy something. So here on the list, you can see like main points as a KYC, AML processes, banking as a service, online brokerage, lending as a service, card issuing and card payments or card authorization, financial account connectivity, card payments process. So lots of processes that you will see, and each vendor is different. And what I really like to do is to develop the way how we can compare them. And for selecting vendors, I would say that we need to put them into different functionality, because if you're taking one solution, you can compare it to another one if they sit in the same category. There are quite a lot of solutions which are cross categories, but putting them into one box will help us to select the proper solutions, and then do the comparison. So like the really first one, acquiring. When you would like to interact with your customers after the onboard processing, we need somehow to get usually the balances or money into the system. And that's the first process, which is called acquiring. And there are quite a lot of vendors which are cross-functional. They're sitting in different boxes like Stripe. It's one of the unicorn as a startup, and they have a lot of functionality. They providing KYC, KYB functionality, acquiring, banking rails, and card issuing and processing. But putting a specific functionality in the box helps us to understand how to compare. And in this case, there is an acquiring process, which we can take as a piece of the business functionality from the Stripe and then compare it to checkout.com. And then we can see, okay, they're in the same category. Let's compare them. How do we integrate with them? How do we compare pricing models, and et cetera, et cetera. So usually pick up the list of the functionality that you have in your fintech solution, put the vendors into the different box which are covering your business process, and then you can understand, do you need really to engage with the third parties, or you can cover yourself, or what are the usual ways how to implement this business process. So vendor types. After selecting the category, I think it's really essential to put the difference in the engagement model, because quite a lot of products, they're not describing this directly, but you need to understand the difference. Because in my point of view, there are different categories of the vendors, and really first one, and really popular nowadays, API-based. If you go to platforms as a Stripe, they really would like you to give an API rather than different type of the engagement with them. Sometimes vendors like that, they have SDKs or some pieces of the software which can be used as a product, but usually they 90% or even more, they API based. And I will give a description what exactly it means. The products, in my understanding, it's something, and that's my kind of categorization. The product is something that you can take and start to use as a customer-facing part, because in this case, if you compare it to APIs, you will need to do certain development work, integration work, but products, usually they have already available part that can be engaging with your customers. And we will talk about this like in the full description of the product. Sources, it's another way how to engage with the vendor. Instead of buying an API or the product itself, you can assess and have an access to the blueprints of the product. And the results is different from the product, because usually in product, you cannot really alter the business functionality or customize it in heavy way. And with the source, it's a little bit different. It's not, if you can compare it to the housing, instead of buying the real house, you will buy the blueprints and all the required materials to build it yourself. And that's sources. So it's kind of the kit that allows you to build the product with the less time to the market, but still gives a really good way, an opportunity to customize to your business processes and the final results. And the licenses, sometimes as the vendor, you can have the license. It's really important for the fintechs, because if you go into the specific market, and in certain jurisdiction, you might not have a licensing ability, and you can engage the vendors to acquire the license for a certain business functionality. So API, application programming interface, usually that's a quite specific way how you can access your vendor, which is allowing software application to communicate with each other. What it means for real. There are applications that are talking to other applications. It means that it's not ready to have a customer-facing application or website. You will need to have a team or engineering part which will do the integration between your vendor as the APIs, and then we'll implement certain logic on top of it. Usually it might be quite thin, but still it's there, like authorization. And I've seen this issue from the business side quite a lot, with not understanding that API interface, application program interface, is not designed to be served to the end customers. And one of the example great example, sometimes there are like banking as a service solutions, which I allow in to access them through API. And then companies, they really would like to save the cost or cut the cost down. And instead of developing the middleware, which is covering the vendor APIs and then providing the mobile application interface to your customers, they're doing the integration directly from the mobile application or the website directly to the APIs of the vendor. And that works. It works as the business process, but it has huge implications on the security, because usually if you have direct access from the customer accessible tools with the specific process of extracting the keys, certain engineers can have unauthorized access to your APIs, which means they can see more than they allowed to, and in some cases even modify the data, which I don't think that it's something that we're looking for in the FinTech projects. We really would like to make sure that we are secured in terms of the trust customers, and the data and business process is not accessible to the third parties without authorization. So APIs, usually it's the way that you will have a business functionality, but you need to do an extra step for the implementation to make sure that your business is running. An API example is really powerful example of Stripe. They provide a lot of functionality like acquiring, card issuing, KYC process. And instead of giving you the admin panel or customer application for your customers to do the onboarding and see their cards, they're giving you an API. And then you're writing code, you're building your brand on top of those APIs and make sure that you're different and successful with the business model and implementation on the market. So API-based vendor is the Stripe, and I think most of you have heard about it. The second one is a product. It's a little bit different. And usually under the hood, there are APIs which are involved in this process. Definitely you will have, if we're talking about the products, you will have customer-facing mobile application websites, which definitely talking to APIs to get the data, to get the authorization, show customers data. But those APIs specifically designed for serving those customer-facing application. And instead of developing yourself, you're getting usually a full life cycle business process, which is usually generic. It has certain way of customization. And maybe one of the example that I can think of in United Kingdom is, for instance, Contis. They're giving you an ability to do the onboarding of the customer, card issuing, and you are getting the white label application, but they're not providing you the sources, which means you will be able only to use the application. And if you would like to alter the business process, you will have to build your own solution and alter it after this, or have certain negotiation to add the feature, then put it into the pipeline and wait for the certain period of time to be developed. So that's usually easier way to the market, but still should be considered quite well, like with a lot of resources to make sure that if the project is successful and you will have the requirements to change the business process, you usually will be limited with this type of the vendor. And another like a great example of the product, which I think is really good, that's our partner, Terabyte Gateway, the company that we help to develop the white label solutions for the Bahrain market. And they providing aggregation product to the banks and financial institution. They leveraging the data from the open banking in this region. And we build them the platform, which is allowing to do the account aggregation, authenticate and access from the customer of the bank. And then they have SDKs and white label solutions for the banks. And here on the screen, you can see NBB, National Bank of Bahrain application, which allows to see all your 360 accounts from different banks and understand your spending, like a personal financial manager product, which is white label. We help to develop it, and that's a really great product example, because instead of developing your own PFM solution, you can go to Terabyte, acquire the license, and have the product, and the features will come out of the box from this product. So that's also the way how it can be executed. And the third type is source-based. And source-based product is a finished set of functionalities or applications that created through software development process. And usually the difference between the final product and source-based not really seen by the customers because they one way or another interacting with the mobile application or the website, but the difference is under the hood for you, because instead of running on the third party's infrastructure and getting the final binaries, usually you will acquire the source codes and the technical documentation, which allows you to run on your infrastructure and, more importantly, alter how the application or the business process works. So in this case, it's quite similar to having own team and spending the time and budget for developing, but instead of waiting for a certain period of time and putting certain risks for the execution, you will get the source codes in no time because it's already exists. And it helps to reduce the time to the market, and it helps you to have solution in between, which is similar to the product, which is ready to use, but also have a possibility to modify. And this approach was really popular like 15 years ago. Nowadays, the vendors, they're pushing you to the BaaS solutions or product solutions, but this approach is seen, in my understanding, quite a lot in software development world, because engineers, they create an open source components, which one way or another they used in digital products, and open sourcing is kind of similar to that. And the difference in this case, it means that in source-based products, you might be paying for the license to use, but it's similar to the products and you have a possibility to assess the sources in terms of the security or even alter up to your needs to the business processes. And one of the example is our own product, which is called FINTECH Core. Instead of providing the BaaS solution or the developing from the scratch, we are proposing to our clients to take ready-made components and have the solution for running the digital bank completely from the scratch with no time, because the integrations are already there for the vendors, and this middleware and customer-facing application, they're ready to use, and you can take them and run your business. So the second type, how we can see the difference in vendors, is the pricing model. And it's quite hidden part usually, because if you go to a lot of vendors, especially the big mile or cornerstone functionality, usually you will not see the pricing. There might be certain references, but it's not really straightforward. So instead of discussing the specifics of the vendors, I would like you to give the framework how you should see the pricing. And under my understanding, there are three main types, and they can be hybrid, because one product can have the per usage pricing and certain fixed cost for a setup fee, but having an ability to split into three different categories, then you have a possibility to compare categories and see how it will affect your business model, because usually you will have this pricing with the vendors put it into your business model and see if it's sufficient. Like a really simple example is card issuing, because if you would like to have the not only digital but physical cards to be issued to your customers delivered, you should be factoring the issuing process and delivering process to your customers, the cost of the leaflet, which affect the customer cost of acquisition and the pricing. And certain businesses, they take in the fee for issuing the cards, certain not, but one way or another, the cost is there. So let's see how we can differentiate them. One of the example of the subscription-based is CFAS. That's a fraud prevention non-profit organization in United Kingdom. They taken the flat fee for £25 per personal usage for the fraud prevention. That's just an example. For business, they charge in more, but in this case, it's quite straightforward. You have a certain period of time when you can access the APIs. They doing certain due diligence, how you're using them. But anyway, in this case, you're not limited to the number of the API calls or how successful or not successful are those checks. You have a flat fee per period, which can be taken or seen as a subscription, maybe similar to Netflix, like you pay in something for a period and then you have an access using or not. So that's one of the example. I would say that in FinTechs nowadays, you can see this quite rare, but still there are vendors, and putting this into the category, you can understand that you can lower down the cost by the numbers of the checks. So if you have the flat fee, as more checks you do, then it allows to combine different vendors and do the cost down. One of the example in Project Imagine Pi 1 platform, we did the integrations through the onboarding with the 3 different vendors. And 2 vendors, they're charging per check, which means if we're checking the customer and we didn't onboard someone, we lost the customer. So we don't have someone then to monetize as a product, but we paid for those checks. And to reduce those checks for the persons who cannot be onboarded to the platform, we did the integration and we did the smart routing, which means we did the checks with the CFAS first, since we don't have any limits or the costs for additional checks for the person. We're checking first, let's say Igor is onboarding to acquire an account, to have an account with the Pi 1 platform. And in this case, we check in with the CFAS, which means we're checking if this person has been detected in fraud prevention in United Kingdom. If someone was found, then we will not check with the KYC AML vendors, which means our costs will go down, because in this case, those initial checks doesn't cost us additional money except the subscription-based approach. So that's one way. The second way, which I usually see, and it's really popular nowadays, it's usage-based. And in this case, Stripe is using everywhere this approach, like identity checks or the KYC checks, they're built the same way. You're paying not to your business functionality, but the implementation of your business functionality. If you need to check someone, it doesn't mean that you're paying only for the customers who are allowed to your platform. You will be paying for the persons who are trying to get into your platform, but they somehow will be denied for during the KYC process, and you will pay for them too. And it's really good to keep this in mind while doing the business model, because I've seen a lot of businesses who are factoring only successful customers into a platform. Like, we would like to have 100,000 customers on our platform, but in this case, you will be paying more for more checks because certain people will not be allowed to your platform, and depending how good you're with the qualification and making sure that people who will successfully will run the checks, it will lower cost you down, because with the bad cases, you might see double numbers. So for getting 100,000 customers, you will have to check 200,000 customers, and it will cost you money. And here in Stripe, you can see that one check is actually $1.50, and you can calculate yourself. It's quite a big amount of money to make sure that someone has been checked but failed with your platform. And we've been doing quite a lot of tricks to reduce, because not even with the KYC, the issue is not always with the documents or a specific person that he's having bad documents where he's doing the identity crimes. An issue sometimes is more in photo quality or the quality of the data of the customer that he's providing. And we've been doing quite a lot of tricks for that. For instance, we acquired additional OCR software, which allows us to make sure that the photo is with no glances, with the decent quality, with the light, which is good enough to do the OCR. And only after that, we send the documents to the KYC vendors. And we reduced the issues with the images 30% down, which means each check costs us 30% down, because we are locally on the mobile phone doing those checks. And after that, we're sending to the third party, which costs money for us. So that's, I think, is also good to understand for the team, not only for the business team, but for a technical team, that usage-based APIs will cost business money, and it can eat a lot of money, and it should be factored into your implementation and the knowledge of the team. And the third type of the products, it's usually more seen in software rather than the business processes, KYC or banking rails. It's a fixed price for the code itself. So it's usually tailored and connected to the source-based projects. You can usually have a license as a subscription, but sometimes there are possibilities to buy out the code. As you can see on this screenshot, there is an SDK which allows you to implement certain business functionality, which costs 400,000 euros as the full licenses for the source code per country, and you can do whatever you want with those sources and update and modify. So that's good to know. And by combining those models and by combining those types of the vendors, you can achieve greater results. And you should keep in mind that there are also different non-functional requirements, like jurisdiction, because in certain countries, and it's a really great example with the KYC vendors, you can think about the vendor which is working with your jurisdiction. And let's say you are implementing the functionality in the United Kingdom. But it's really important to understand that people who might use your service, they might not be residents of UK. And if you're limiting yourself and you're lowering down the cost for the vendors for the KYC, who is actively accepting the documents only from the United Kingdom, then if you have no blockers to onboard the foreigners, you will be blocked from the business process because the KYC vendor will not support. But having the vendor with the larger functionality for, let's say, different jurisdictions, because there are quite a lot of different documents in the world. And let's say we're choosing Onfido, which is global player, and they support a lot of documents, but it means that the pricing will be higher. And it should be taken in into the consideration, like what jurisdictions are supported, because the functionality from the APIs or the integration is the same. Like, it doesn't mean that for each country you will need to implement each integration, but what inside they support is really important. Pricing model also is affected, and you should take a look not only on the successful cases for the execution of your product, as we usually think like someone is sending the documents, then approved into the platform, and then having an account for business functionality, which is generating the profit for you, but also taking into the account the pricing model for failed cases. What if someone is, I don't know, is allowed to actually to go through the KYC, but then you are printing the card is delivered, but never activated. And that should be factored in your business model and pricing model, like how you will pay for the failed cases. And usually it's sitting on your side, on your product, rather than the vendor, because the vendor will get the money for the issuing the card, which never has been activated, or how the lost cards will be managed, because you will pay for the reissuing if there is no fees for doing that. Support model is also required, like what kind of support the company is providing you, especially if it's not API based, because if sources, it's really important, or the product, how fast the company will solve the issues and what is the process. And which is also important is customization, because as we usually start, and we're all in startup world, which means today we're starting with one business model. Usually we'll need to do the pivot of the business product. And more importantly, if we're growing and our customer base becoming larger, we usually would like to provide more functionality. And if we're using BaaS solutions, how the customization is happening, what are the features that we would like to roll to the market, how it's possible with the certain vendors. Usually it's not so well defined when we negotiate, and I really suggest to go and take a look with a larger horizon to make sure that it's running as required. And one of the good example of good choice for the vendor, the KYC process for the project Imagine, as I said, the KYC process, and nowadays the KYC vendors becoming more sophisticated, but still there are quite a lot of which can be optimized by combining certain vendors and models. AI becoming the part of our world, and which can be done. And we've done so in this project. We combined two different vendors with the two different models. We had OCR, which is fixed price, and which is helping us to detect the document and make sure that the photo of the document is well, with a good quality and with no issues with OCR. And only after that, we were sending this information to the KYC vendor. It means that we paid extra, because why doing so? We can go directly to the KYC and do the uploads of the documents. So in one hand, we're kind of adding something as a cost, but what was really good choice for us is that we actually lowered the cost down, because we eliminated all those failed cases when the customer didn't have an access to the application because there was a glare or certain issues with the light, with the photo. It means the information on the documents cannot be read, automatically scanned, and the customer was rejected through the KYC process. Yes, I understand nowadays KYC vendors, they're tending to have those scans before on the local SDKs of the mobile application, but they're not putting quite a lot of effort there. There are companies with OCRs which are pretty good, and technically speaking, even the team of your engineers might have an ability to train on the data specific to you. If you're on board and you're active in the business, you might have already a huge bunch of the data which is there, and you can train the models specifically for you, which will help you to eliminate those issues. So that's a really good choice, how defining different categories and different approaches in vendors, you can lower down the cost when on the first glance, you might think that it will give more cost for you. And the example of the bad choice, that's a specific vendor, no issues with the Centralink from Bank of Lithuania, but it's also the part of the process that you should keep in your head when you're running the integration, because we had a company from United Kingdom who had preliminary contract with the Centralink for the integration for the SEPA payments in European Union. And we've been engaged as the software development company to help them the integration. But we always approaching the engineering part from the product parts, like we can jump in, start developing, but before developing, we were checking if it will work as a product flow. And first thing which we checked is the licensing and ability for UK company, which is MEI license, to use the Centralink, and find out that after the Brexit, actually APIs and the license is not allowing to do so. So to be active in Centralink as an integration, you should have European license, which this company at that stage didn't have. And that helped a lot, because in this case, the task literally was to do the implementation, and we had the possibility to do so. But instead of developing the code, we chosen to check if this process can be implemented and will give the output to the business, which is required, like a functional production system. And the code is a little bit different from the production system, because somehow you might be not allowed to be active on the live production, which we did, and we find out. And it was good really from the technical standpoint, pricing standpoint, but the legal standpoint was failed, and no one thought it through. And we did extra mile, and I think it's bad choice which was done before us, because it didn't allow to run the business as required, and we had to find other solutions for making sure that the business is running. So this should be kept in mind and taken a look, not from only from technical standpoint, but from the business standpoint too. Vendors integrations. A little bit about this process. I think that's the biggest gap that API-based companies, they're not really talking about this out loud, but they put in an extra effort on companies, because if you go to Stripe, no one will tell that, okay, we are doing the heavy lift in terms of acquiring card issuing, but you will have to do the heavy lifting too, which means you will implement the customer-facing applications. That's one part. But which is more importantly, you will be required to do even specific business process which are common, like authorization. Because if you go to Stripe, in certain parts you can drop into the application SDKs, but for larger business process, you will have to do the authorization, which, like a simple example, I would like to have a feature which is paid, and you can actually integrate the SDKs of Stripe, but you cannot keep the decision making of the feature enabling in your mobile application, because if there is a specific API which is by calling which you will enable the feature, which is like you are getting the payment, the SDK of Stripe saying that the funds has been acquired, the card has been successfully charged, and you need to enable a specific feature for the customer, this decision should be made only on the backend. And there is quite interesting issue that it's quite old. We all know iOS platform, and there is in-app purchase functionality. And actually, Apple did this pretty big issue or common issue in their iOS. In version 4, there was a specific way to tell the servers to Apple that in-app purchase was paid, but actually not doing it. And that's what API-based platforms, they're not telling you, that there is a specific cases which usually connected to the balances, features, which cannot be implemented on the mobile-facing applications. By providing the APIs, anyway, you will be required to have the middleware or the backend, which is running certain features and encapsulating or hiding from the customer from accessing from the mobile application or websites. Because if you will enable them in those customer-facing applications, they can be reverse engineered, and then those features can be enabled for free. And even Apple did those issues. If you're interested, I can send the links after the webinar to those cases. It was really big. Apple had to do the update to iOS, and it was really big issue with their trust if they can develop properly. And even those big companies like Apple doing those issues, and it's not bad thing, it's just usual part of the software engineering, but it should be kept in mind while designing the solution. The second type of the source-based, it's easier, a little bit easier if you compare it to APIs, because the number of technical persons might be lowered, or you can outsource this solution, because if you're buying sources, usually in the contract, they might be the service for running those applications or building it for your business process, but you have the sources. You usually have the specific middleware, the specific mobile applications, which can be accessed by the customers, and you ready to go. And with the product-based applications or vendors, you don't need to have the technical team, but it puts you into the vendor lock, which means it's really hard to control the environment and security of those products, because they might be running in third parties. And we've been seeing cases like that in our experience. One of the vendor, which is, I would say, API-based. It's kind of similar to the product, but API-based. They run in the card issuing application with us. And we are getting the tokenized card. And at certain point of time, we started to receive the full plans of the card, which means our platform should be PCI DSS compliant at this stage, but we were not. And that's an issue, because you're never in control with the product basis or API-based software that an update happened and you're compliant with this update, you will get the information that you required. So, and you're not in control over the security, because you never know who is accessing those platforms and who's running, especially if the vendor is smaller and not really well known to the market. So that's a little bit about the integration. If you have other questions for the integration, I will be glad to answer during the question time. And one small example of the digital bank. So usually, like, I can see this stack, banking stack this way. So on top of this stack, you have your own brand, your own look and feel, value proposition to the customers. You might be aiming to specific fragment of the people on the market with the UI, values, and et cetera, et cetera. That's something that your product team is usually taking care of. And there is a lot of business processes which can be outsourced as a user interface, compliance, risk management, financial crimes, payments, customer operations, products as shelves, like what you're providing, checking current accounts, et cetera, treasury and general ledger. And you usually, your actually is responsible for the brand. You have a possibility to choose the vendors for all those cases. And what is also important, digital banks, it's like license holders, because you can become yourself an e-money institution, electronic money institution, which is allowing you to issue electronic monies and hold them on the accounts of the customers. But also you can go to the third parties, which are license holders, and instead of acquiring the license from yourself, you can build the brand, but you will be reliant on those license holders. And one of the example of the vendors that allows you to implement them, challenger bank like Galileo in the United States, Thread in United Kingdom, Marketa, which is one of the well-known player and one of the first BAO solution, Rails Bank, Solaris, Synapse. There are quite a lot, and they providing you the mixed functionality. You can have a different boxes tickled with them, like KYC, onboarding, account holding, etc., etc. And license holders, they usually also can be hybrid model, like Solaris Bank or Starling Bank. They can provide you an API, but also act as a license holder in your project. And I think the framework that today I gave is really giving you the possibility to take quite options like Starling Bank or Solaris and put them into different boxes and compare it to other solutions, because they might not be able to provide you the license holding, but also they will provide the serve functionality. And by splitting it into smaller chunks, you will be able to compare them and make the decisions that are beneficial to your business. And maybe a little bit about the banking as a service. So in my understanding, it's really important for the digital banks to have the differentiation between banking as a service and core banking functionalities, because usually banking as a service is something that is provided to you as API based or the product based. So basically you don't need to create the product yourself, and it will be accessible to your customers or after building the middle layer and customer facing applications as a service. But there is banking core solutions. It's quite old approach when you will have the software which you have an ability to run on your infrastructure. And in this case, for me, it's more core banking, but there are quite different reading of those things in the internet, in the community. So, and a little bit about the FinTech core today, because we are educating and we're trying to talk about the FinTechs, because we actively promoting our own product, which is called FinTech Core. It's a white label cloud solution for launching the FinTechs products. The main category for this project is source-based licensing, which means we are providing the source codes and you're able to integrate with the vendors or have the pre-integrated plugins from our side for different business processes as onboarding, KYC, balance orchestration. It will be connected to the banking accounts orchestration, card orchestration, which means you can run the full-fledged digital bank with that, and a lot of additional functionality like cross-border deposits, credits, notifications, and back office, which is required definitely. We also have the multi-support and multi-region and multi-languages support, which makes this solution pretty great if you're starting from the scratch and you would like to focus more on the business rather than the tech, which usually is really a heavy lifting part for the business. Thank you for your time. I think I covered a lot of things today, and you have an ability to do the questions. I see the question in the chat. Do you have plugins or connectivity to open banking APIs? Yes, it's a FinTech core. We have the integration with the Blade, Saltage, and TrueLayer. So we have the integration with those vendors, which are facilitating the open banking for aggregation and payment initiation, if it's possible in the specific jurisdiction. Because, for instance, Blade is given an ability to start the payments only in the United Kingdom and Europe. I hope it answered your question. Can you recommend card issuing API for crypto product? It's really good question, because I would say that we have a lot of experience helping with the APIs for the card issuing, but the crypto really should be taken into the account, because there are different products, and depending how you highlight this product to the specific vendor, they might be able to provide an access to APIs. In this case, if you would like, we can have a scheduled meeting with me. We can discuss what is your product, and depending on your case, I will be able to pick up something more tailored for your case, because I would say that there is no like a single way for implementing the APIs and card issuing for the crypto nowadays, because there are always questions depending on jurisdictions, the type of the crypto, etc., etc. I see that Jade is asking, can we get the recording? Yes, this particular webinar is recorded and is going to be shared at our YouTube channel. So you will have the possibility to take a look and get back to the things which are specifically interested for you. And okay, maybe you have more questions, guys. You can type it or you can talk. Do we have to onboard the vendors separately, or it's simplified when you use your plugin? It's not really clear by the product flow, because we provide in the FinTech core as a product, and it has a specific usage. Like we have the components which can be used for authorizing through the open banking and doing the account aggregation and payment initiation, but there is a bigger picture how you would like to use in your product. So we have an engine which allows to do that, so you don't need to write the code, but how you looking, how do you see the integration of our product into your system, or you're building the system from the scratch. So Umesh, if it works for you, you can, yeah, I think our team will share the calendar HubSpot link to my calendar, and you will be able, and actually you can see on the screen, you can see the book a call QR code, so you can scan it and book the call with me with all detailed questions which are tailored to your products, and then I will be able to talk and see more in detail what is actually required and find the solution for your situation. So please use the link, and then we will schedule the call. Thank you for your questions, Umesh and Bolarivna, if I'm pronouncing it well. So thank you for your questions, guys. Do you have more? Okay, I think that's it. Thank you for your time. It was a pleasure today to talk and share our experience and our vision how to work with vendors. And I hope to see you guys on the next webinars. Have a really nice evening and see you soon. Bye.
Have a great day. Bye.